Fala pessoal, Gabriel Martins aqui para mais um vídeo no canal do Cara dos Esportes. Hoje eu vou conversar com o Colin Holba, long snapper do Los Angeles Rams. Eu já conheço ele há algum tempo e o Colin vai contar para a gente todos os detalhes, todos os bastidores de como é ser um jogador na NFL. Ele foi draftado em 2017 pelo Pittsburgh Steelers, passou pelo Jacksonville Jaguars, pelo San Francisco 49ers, pelo New York Giants. Tá agora no Los Angeles Rams e a gente passou por tudo, desde o futebol americano universitário, como é o processo do draft, combine, senior bowl, como é que é training camp, como é que é a semana de um jogo, como é que é lidar com estrelas dentro de um vestiário da NFL, a dificuldade que é de mudar de times várias vezes, ter que fazer testes e, enfim, todos os bastidores ali, tudo que a gente não vê de ser um jogador na NFL, o Colin contou pra gente, porque a gente acompanha os Tom Brady's da vida, os Patrick Mahomes da vida, mas eles são a ponta da ponta da ponta do iceberg. A realidade, o mundo real na NFL são caras como o Colin. Então foi uma conversa muito legal, eu aprendi bastante, tenho certeza que vocês vão aprender também. E não perca, na metade do vídeo eu vou dar mais detalhes sobre uma promoção que está rolando em tempo limitado lá no podcast, na newsletter e no meu perfil no Twitter. Tudo que eu faço aqui no Cara dos Esportes, uma promoção por tempo limitadíssimo, então fique de olho. Mas vamos lá para minha conversa com o Colin Holba. How did you become a long snapper?
Um, so I was actually a quarterback growing up, and probably I think it was fifth grade we started to do actual special teams and punts, and I was really the only one that was able to get the ball back to a punter that was about 12 yards back, maybe 10 yards back. And the coach just was kind of like, "Yeah, you're kind of naturally gifted at it. Keep this in your back pocket. I know you want to be a quarterback or a pitcher in baseball." He's like, "But don't don't leave this information out when you go to high school and if you try to play college ball or anything." Um, so it's always just something that obviously I had to work, really hard at to get to where I'm at now. But early on, it was just something that it just kind of similar to a quarterback throwing motion. It was just kind of natural for me, I guess.
And what is like playing college football from the outside, movies and stuff? Some might think it's a lot of hard work, a lot of partying, but not a lot of studying. Is it really possible to play on a high level like you did and also really study to get a degree?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so I graduated with a finance degree. I got a major in finance, a minor in management, and I was able to stay on the dean's list and the academic honor roll and get ACC honor roll and stuff like that. I'll say this as a specialist, there's not a ton of like film and playbook study time that you have to have. So all of the time that the average position player has to spend studying their actual position in that playbook, I can devote more to school. So it is a little, I would say it's probably easier being a specialist just because the on the field information for me, there's just not as much. I mean, if you think about it in workload, the average player on offense or defense, if their starters playing about 60 plays a game, I was playing about 10. And so just right there, there's your 1/6 of the information kind of you have to know. Um, I would say you can definitely have a good time in college. I definitely had a good time. But it's just all about the priorities that you want to have. If your priority is what degree you want to get, and you know that at some point football is going to end, then you're gonna devote a good amount of time and attention to getting the degree and football. I think a lot of it is guys go to college not so much worried, especially big college, ACC, SEC, Big Ten. They go to school on a football scholarship, and their mindset is, I'm here to play football, and then everything else falls in line. So I think if you have a plan, if you want to be a teacher, an accountant, whatever that a coach, whatever that may look like, you're going to also spend time, away from football, dedicating to that. But if you're just there for football mentally as an 18, 19-year-old kid, well, all you're going to do is fill your time with other stuff outside of
Mhm.
outside of school.
When did you know you could do this professionally?
Um, Probably. So my goal going into my senior year. So really, my goal Just to backtrack a little bit, I went to U of L as a baseball manager. After they won the Sugar Bowl, I tried out and walked onto the team. And so I kind of just had incremental goals. So there was a guy that was a 4-year starter ahead of me. I sat the bench behind him for 2 years, and I thought he was really good. And he got invited to multiple rookie mini camps. And so my goal was A, to become a starter, B, to get put on scholarship. And then, going into my senior year, it was just, okay, if I can just go and get an invite to some rookie mini camps, like that would be really cool. And then by about October, November, I started getting a lot of serious inquiries from agents, and I was asking some of the other guys I was playing with, and some of the bigger name guys like a James Quick, Keith Kelsey, like multiple year starters, guys that we all knew were going to get some sort of shot at training camp in the NFL. They were getting, obviously they were getting the attention that we all kind of expected them to. And then I was asking other guys who, are kind of borderline starter, stuff like that. I was like, hey, like, are you getting these emails? Are you getting these messages? And they're like, no. And so I went back and asked some of the guys that were specialists ahead of me when I was a younger player. I was like, hey, like, how did this process work for you? And it was for me, it was just very different. And so at that point it started to kind of click, especially when scouts started talking to me at practice and stuff like that. So it was probably about the middle to the end of the year that I started to notice that I was getting a little bit more attention than just the average senior on our team.
And what is the draft process like? Can you tell us what is like participating on the combine, and then what does the next couple months look like for a draft prospect like you were?
So I got invited to the Senior Bowl, and I got invited to the NFLPA Bowl. And then there's a couple more. There's the East-West Shrine Game. There's a Tropical Bowl. So there's about 5 or 6 college all-star games that happen. But I think the Senior Bowl ends like the week of the AFC or NFC championship game. So they kind of go through the end of January. And so I played my last college bowl game. I played the Citrus Bowl, and then I took about 2 days to kind of collect my thoughts, get my mind ready for this NFL process, sign with an agent and that stuff. And then I trained more specifically for the Senior Bowl, for actually practicing and being in an NFL type environment with their coaching staffs. And then after that was over, I then got invited to the combine. And so then it started a little less like padded football training and a little bit more of the 40, the bench, the vertical, all the numbers that you look at. And kind of in the process, it's funny because your rookie year going into, when you come out of college, that time feels like it takes forever. And I think it's because you're so used to having something every day, and there's a big schedule for you every day, and now you're kind of cut loose. So it just seems like that each month takes forever. That month from the last game to the Senior Bowl, the month from the Senior Bowl to combine, from the combine to your pro day, from pro day to draft, each month kind of seems like it's forever. And now, this in the off season, when you're already in the league, it just feels like every week just slips by faster and faster. But really, so my big thing was just kind of take each thing in that month increment that you got, and then prepare for that. And then as soon as pro day was over, I really just wanted to prepare myself for OTAs as best as possible.
And in the combine, what was that experience like?
It'd be like sprinting a marathon, I think would be the best explanation. It's a great honor to get invited. Generally only one long snapper gets invited to the combine every year. My year there was 2. So still a fantastic honor to be invited to the combine as a long snapper. And so I never want to take anything away from it, because it's a very, very cool experience. Obviously you get a ton of exposure. You get to be in front of pretty much everybody that's a decision maker on an NFL team. So it's an invaluable experience. It's also kind of the 4 longest days possible, because you get there and you're all excited and pumped up, and they get you all that free gear, and then you go to the hospital and, they're pulling blood, they're weighing you, they're picking you, they're poking you. I mean, I remember Dalvin Cook had to sit in the MRI machine for like 6 straight hours just because all his injuries in college and stuff like that. So that's the first day. Then the second day is just straight. They strip you into your compression shorts and a t-shirt, and that's when you get on stage and they weigh you, they measure you. They do the body fat for you. And so the first 2 days are just excruciatingly long of hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait to do all these things and these tests. And then later on that night, you do interviews and teams can start to schedule interviews with you. And so it's just mentally kind of exhausting because you want to be on top of your game at all costs. But that's just the first 2 days, and you haven't really done anything physical yet. And so, you have some guys aren't trying to eat a whole lot because they want to weigh a certain weight. And then it's like, okay, in 2 days, you got to do the on-field stuff, or you got to bench, or you got to, so it's just a whole lot of chaos, organized chaos. And you're trying your very best because for every single person, I don't care, for this year, if you're Trevor Lawrence, and obviously they're not having a combine, but if you're one of these can't miss prospects, it's still the biggest job interview of your life.
To people who doesn't know you, you got drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers on the sixth round of the 2017 NFL draft. How awesome is hearing your name being selected? Do you know ahead of time, or do you only find out when the pick is in?
And with the 213th pick of the 2017 NFL Draft, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Colin Holba, long snapper from Louisville.
So I found out, I forget who was picking the pick before the Steelers, but pretty much as soon as the pick before the Steelers went on the clock on TV, I got a phone call. It was Coach Tomlin called me and just saying, "Hey, Colin, like, what are you doing right now?" I was like, I'm sitting at home, like trying to take my mind off the draft. He's like, "Well, I'm gonna put your mind on the draft real quick." And like, I had told all my friends I wasn't expecting to get drafted. You never, I don't think anybody, especially a specialist, goes into it saying, I'm going to expect to get drafted, because you can only lead to disappoint yourself. But I'd kind of told everybody, like, nobody text me, nobody call me until, this time period. Because I don't, if my phone rings, like something's happening. And so I had some friends and family over, and so my phone rings and it's an unknown area code, and they're all hyped up. They're all excited. And I remember I took my phone. I'm like, "It's Coach Tomlin." And my dad heard me, and he pointed for me to step outside. So I went on the back porch and started having that conversation. And he kind of told everybody inside, hey, he's talking to the Steelers head coach. And then about a minute or so later, I'm on the phone. They'd already told me they're going to draft me, and it popped up on the TV, and, everybody started going crazy and stuff.
Pequeno intervalo para falar de uma promoção que está rolando por tempo muito limitado, só até o dia 7 de março. Você pode adquirir o podcast exclusivo para apoiadores e newsletter exclusiva para apoiadores, onde eu posto todos os meus textos. Você pode adquirir acesso a eles até o final da off-season, até o dia 31 de agosto, por apenas R$50, pagamento pelo Pix. Tá na tela aí o Pix, que é o e-mail caradossports@gmail.com. Faz o pagamento lá, tira um print, me manda por esse e-mail ou manda lá por DM no Twitter, no @caradossports, que você vai garantir acesso até o final da off-season. Tem o draft pela frente, tem o mercado de free agents pela frente, tem muita coisa aí para acontecer na off-season da NFL, que não, na verdade não é uma off-season, tem muita coisa acontecendo. Então, vamos voltar para o vídeo, mas não deixe de aproveitar essa promoção. And what is training camp like? Walk us through a regular day on a training camp in the NFL.
So as a specialist, it's pretty similar to a normal practice week. The schedule's a little bit more flexible just because you don't have the game every single week. Because even in training camp until the third preseason game, you're more working on yourself and evaluating your own roster than you are preparing a game plan and implementing a game plan for another team. So for us, you're going to lift every day. You're going to practice for about 3 hours every day. And then there's going to be about an hour and a half of walkthroughs. And then throughout all that time, you have plenty of meeting time. You have body maintenance time. You got to sneak some meals in. You got to try and sneak a nap in. I would say as a rookie, the biggest thing is just everything is new, right? So even if you got drafted after your junior year of college, you were used to being pretty good in college, generally. If you're going to play in the NFL, you're probably pretty good in college for at least 2 years. So you're kind of comfortable with your spot in college, where you stack up on the team. And then B, you're just kind of used to what a college camp schedule looks like. And there is a little bit of flexibility because it's not as long. It's about 2.5 weeks. Then you get into school and they still have to respect school a little bit. Whereas the NFL, like, this is your full blown job, and they're bringing guys in for workouts and stuff like that. And you're still trying to be like, is that guy my size? Is that guy not my size? And it hasn't really kicked in until you watch the first guy that you came in with get cut, and you're like, oh crap. Like, this is the real, like, they ain't playing around right now. And then you start to do the numbers game, and you're like, all right, well, like, so for me within Pittsburgh, you're like, all right, well, Big Ben's not going anywhere. And then you kind of start to deduct spots. And for me as a specialist, it's 1-for-1. So it really was a head-to-head competition. But like, my buddy was a tight end, and, he's looking at it. He's like, all right, well, like, Jesse James isn't going anywhere. They just traded for Vance McDonald. And so, like, you can kind of start to try and stack yourself up on where you're at on the roster. And there's just such a whole mental aspect because, you go to camp in college, even if you have a bad camp, the worst thing that happens is you're not going to start, or you're not going to, be in the exact position you thought you would. Whereas in the NFL, like, man, if you're having a bad week, they could replace you that very next week.
You talk about Big Ben, and I know you played with Le'Veon Bell at the time, Antonio Brown. You played with a bunch of stars, Barkley at the Giants, and so on, so on. What is this? You have so many players on different levels. Like, when you were a rookie, for example, there were a lot of veterans giving you shit. There's a hierarchy inside the team, or is everybody like pretty chill, pretty professional?
So in my experience so far, and I've bounced around a little bit, but each team is different. So the Steelers kind of was a very not player run, but Coach Tomlin gave a lot of autonomy to the players. So you had Ryan Shazier and Cameron Hayward, and James Harrison. They got a lot of, I wouldn't say like, they weren't dictating practice and they weren't doing anything like that, but they had a major influence on the locker room. And then, like you said, on the offensive side with all those big offensive names, plus Pouncey, plus Villanueva. And so for them, it was a very like, hey, we're a very established team. Like, there's only 1 or 2 spots that we're trying to fill. And so you come in, and it's, even TJ Watt, first rounder, his brother's JJ. So he comes in, and it's like, look, dude, like, you just got drafted to a team that went to the AFC Championship game last year. We're 1 or 2 plays away from the Super Bowl. You got to really prove yourself because we got a solid group here. And so you go to different teams. Like, when I went to camp with the 49ers, like, they had just, Coach Shanahan had a good year when Jimmy was healthy, and ended that first season really well. And then Jimmy got hurt the year before. And so it wasn't as good of a season. And so, like, in the 2019 season, when I went to camp with the 49ers, you had a lot of guys earning a spot on the team. And so there weren't as many as established roles, just because, in the culture of a team that had a losing record versus a winning history, there's more changing parts and stuff like that. So now obviously the Niners have, been successful. They've kind of really established some players. And so, like, with the Giants, you have a guy like Barkley who's established, but he's still a young guy. And so it's just kind of the dynamic of the locker room, of how it lays out. But a lot of times, because it is a job, and because, even superstars, look at, Carson Wentz is, he hits a couple of hiccups and he's on a different team. And, you see a guy like Josh Rosen be a first round pick, and, he goes then to Miami and then bounced, and, he's kind of bouncing around. So even the biggest of names are kind of always looking over their shoulder in one way or another, just because nobody's safe. I mean, JJ Watt got released. DeAndre Hopkins got traded. Carson Wentz is on a different team now. And just, you always have to understand, like, Tom Brady's on the Bucks, and you always have to understand you're not bigger than anybody. Everybody's a movable piece.
Walk us through a game week. Like, you played on Sunday. Now, what is like Monday through the other Sunday?
So Monday after a win is pretty easy. We call it Victory Monday, and basically you'll go in, guys that played will go get their bodies checked if they need a massage, acupuncture, anything like that. They'll do body maintenance stuff, and that's kind of at their leisure. And then the coaches kind of give you that day off. And then Tuesday is the full-blown day off. And really, it's kind of on your own. If you want to roll out, stretch, guys in nicer climates will go golf, or if you have families, they'll go do stuff with them. And that's when the coaches are putting game plans together. And then really Wednesday is an install day. You're going over the new game plan. You're going over the new assignments. If some guys' roles are going to be tweaked a little bit, that's when you're going to do it. And then Thursday, you build on that. It's okay, this worked in practice. This didn't work in practice. And then Friday, really, you're building up to, okay, we should be fine tuning this thing. Saturday is generally a walkthrough, and then you either hop on the plane to wherever you're going, or you have, again, some downtime before you have to meet at the hotel. And then it's Sunday again. Where it gets kind of sticky is when you play like those Thursday night games and you have to have that condensed schedule.
No other job you have to deal with so much rejection and constant analysis of your performance. How hard is to deal with this? How hard is the psychological pressure that goes into playing the NFL?
I mean, it's tough. I'm not gonna lie. And I think certain guys handle it differently. I think there is a reason why the NFL has such a high success rate with free agents. Because you look at most other sports, basketball and baseball, you're really not seeing a free agent come to the cream of the crop. Whereas, kind of like I said, everybody can get rejected. I mean, it was pretty well documented that Tom Brady still got called out by Belichick. Like I said about Rosen, that guy goes from being a first-round pick quarterback, so everybody expects him to be there for a while. Then you look at guys like Bortles, who was a first-round pick. Eventually, after a couple of years, gets his team to the AFC Championship game, almost wins that game, gets a new contract, and then, Minshew Mania happens, and he's out in LA, and then Denver, and then LA. And so it's, I think it's very easy to think that you're getting picked on, to think that you're the only one getting criticized, you're the only one under a microscope. But in reality, every single person is under a microscope in some way or other. Even the coaches are. I mean, when I was with the Giants, I really liked Shermer. I thought he did a good job communicating to the team. And he still goes to the podium after a game or after a practice, and he has reporters putting the mic in his face like, hey, how do you feel about your job? And so I think when you're looking at yourself and you're feeling down about yourself, it's very easy to be like, man, like everybody's picking on me, like blah, 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 blah. No one likes me. Nothing I do is good enough. And then you kind of step back and your reaction's like, no, like everybody is being coached up in some way or another. Or everybody's under a microscope. I mean, you get guys that, were performing really well on a rookie contract. And so they were exceeding the expectations of a rookie contract. And then they sign a big deal and they don't live up to that, big deal performance. And so then they're under a microscope. And so my rookie year is definitely hard. Because again, I was very successful in college. I was able to go to the combine, go to the Senior Bowl, have just a very successful career. My confidence was sky high, and then you immediately get to the NFL, and there's no security blanket of we're going to critique you, and you still are guaranteed a spot. And so you can get kind of sad and get kind of butthurt and in your own feelings. But then you realize this is happening to everybody. I mean, that year when I was with Pittsburgh, James Harrison got replaced by TJ Watt. I mean, you just have to realize it comes with the territory of the job. Player, coach, strength coach, anything. Everybody's job is constantly up for evaluation.
That being said, how sweet was beating the Steelers on the 2017 playoffs when after they cut you? You're obviously playing for the Jaguars.
Yeah. It was more sweet to win the game, and it didn't really matter who I was playing. just because it meant I got to go to the AFC Championship game. And I know guys that played in the league for 5-10 years who had never even been to the playoffs. And so I didn't want to get hung up on who we beat. I was just more excited about how lucky was I that in the middle of the year, I got picked up by a team, which that was great. And then B, that team just so happened to be a really good team that went on to go win 2 games in the playoffs. Like I said, it's all business. Like, it could happen that this year, I get picked back up by the Steelers or something like that. And so you can never really take anything personal. You gotta be where your feet are and just be happy about what you and your team was able to accomplish and less about who you accomplished it against.
You told me in the past about like tryouts and teams calling you to see where you're at. What is that like? It's like 3 or 4 long snappers they bring in and you guys work out together. Is there a fear one of them gonna jump you on the parking lot? Is it tense like that? Or what is like a tryout?
So COVID changed everything. Because this past year with COVID, tryouts were you had to quarantine for a full week before you're even allowed to try out. So that kind of changed everything because you get the phone call and you'd have to wait around. And so there were multiple times where I would go out and fly out on like a Wednesday or Thursday, and during my quarantine, watch the team that I was getting ready to work out for play Sunday, and then I still wouldn't work out for them until about Monday or Tuesday. But as far as like snappers, there's a really good fraternity of guys who we really root for each other. We try to build each other up because it's a small community. I would say there's about 40 guys, maybe a little bit more, but you got the 32 guys that are actively playing on a Sunday any given week. And then you got about 8 to 10 guys that, are either on IR or free agents or whatever, P squad. And so, you go to a workout and it's not really me versus you, if that makes sense, because the team generally has an idea of how guys are, who's 1, who's 2, who's 3, who's 4. And generally they just kind of bring out guys in their order that, and they just kind of want you to prove that you are who they think you are. Just generally a workout is anywhere from 5 to 15 snaps on a punt. Maybe you run a little bit, maybe you do some protection drills, but there's not a whole lot to send you through a game scenario. And so what I've kind of noticed through the past couple of years, a lot of the workouts is this guy still in shape? Is he still mentally prepared to be able to, on the drop of a hat, be able to get on a plane and come perform at the highest level? And does he still want to be here? I think that's something that they can gauge for guys, especially, if you get a young guy that's discouraged and it's like, yeah, this guy hasn't been working out. This guy mentally isn't prepared to immediately go in. Or no, like this guy has been taking his time off and he's been doing everything he can. But you just kind of root for each other because, there's not really a whole lot that if I have a good day and someone else who's there has a good day, there's not really much to differentiate us between each other. It's more of up for what the team's looking for, who they like. And so you just got to root each other on because there's only a handful of people in the world right now that know what us, especially as long snappers and other specialists, are going through. So it's better to make friends out there than enemies.
What do you do when you're not signed with the team?
So my first 2 years, I was a substitute teacher. I did mostly high school. I did math and PE and then some other stuff scattered throughout there. And then this year I was working at a golf store. I'm still working there part-time just because it's kind of hard because for me, I got a finance degree. And so you go in for a job interview and you got to be very transparent and be like, hey, if I get a phone call, like I'm leaving. Sorry, like I'm out. And they're like, all right, well, like, what do you mean you leaving? Like, when would you be back? Don't know. I could be back 2 days later. I could be back, at the end of the season.
Hopefully never.
Yeah. And so that it does definitely kind of limit you on what exactly you can do, because, you know, I've had some interviews just when it's been, you know, a couple months in between phone calls where it's like, you know, maybe I should start thinking about life after football. And you meet with the guy and he's like, all right, like you know, we'd possibly hire you, but I want you for 3 months of training uninterrupted. And it's like, yeah, well, like 3 months is the NFL season. So I can't, I can't commit to that. And so it's really just finding something flexible. And then in your downtime, just really networking as best you can so that you can be set up and have good connections whenever the chapter of life of football does close.
This might sound like a dumb question, but where do you live? Like, you can move into every city without knowing how long you'll be there.
So you mean when I'm on a team?
No, like when you're between teams, what do you have do you go from city to city? Do you have a permanent home? Then you just fly out there?
Gotcha. Yeah. So me and my wife have a home in Kentucky. My parents and her parents are from here. And so it's just kind of easy that we both have good connections here. So when I needed a job, it was easy for me to find a job. And then when I'm gone, my wife has the help of her parents and my parents with our dog and helping out with the house. And then generally during the season, if a team signs me, I'll either live in a hotel or they have like month-to-month apartments. And so I just kind of feel out kind of the price and kind of how much time is left in the season.
Have you ever thought this might be it? I might not get another chance.
Yeah. Yeah. When I got cut from the 49ers during the 2019 season after week 2, I'd gotten talks from the XFL. The XFL had actually drafted me, and I was one game away from getting a vested year that year. And so I kind of told the XFL, like, hey, like, you know, one game means more to me in the long term this year than playing with you guys. So thank you, but no thank you. It's just not the best decision for me. But, you know, when you go 2, 3, 4 months without a phone call, and then when you go to these workouts and, you know, coaches or scouts or whoever's running it tells you like, hey, you did a good job, you know, we like you, but whatever, but we're not going to sign you right now for whatever reason it may be. And, you know, sometimes it's discouraging if they bring you out for a workout and they don't sign anybody, because then you feel like, well, what was the point of any of us coming out here? And then, you know, it can be discouraging if, you know, especially early on when it was, okay, we like you, but this other guy has more experience than you. For me right now, I've played in at least one game for the past 4 seasons. And so now it's like, okay, like I've been good enough to get in at least one game, but I'm looking at other guys my age and they're starting to latch on to teams. And so it's like, all right, well, like, what does that guy have that I don't? And so I think you always have to be prepared for what if I never play again? I mean, you got to look at, you know, as tragic as it is, like, look at what happened to Tiger Woods yesterday. Like, you know, I'm praying for him and his family and thankful that, you know, he got out of surgery and he should be able to be good. But, you know, he may never play golf at the same competitive level that he was able to before. And so I think it's easy when you're young, especially really young in the league, your rookie or second year, to think that, you know, I have my whole career ahead of me, like everything's going to work out. But I think you got to find interests outside of football. I think you got to have a lot of introspective, like, hey, you know, this is kind of where I stack up on rosters. This is kind of how teams are viewing me as a player. But it's hard because you're super competitive guys. Like, you don't get to the NFL unless you're a super competitive guy, unless you believe in yourself. And sometimes the hardest thing is to admit, like, yeah, that guy's actually better than me. So I think in the back of your mind, especially when things aren't going as well as, you know, you're hoping they do, you have to always be prepared for, you know, what if I never get to suit back up again?
You know, with the Rams, right? And it's a team that has a lot of expectations for the season after they trade for Matthew Stafford. What is it like being a player and seeing your team making such a big move?
So, I mean, the moves kind of started for the Rams before even Stafford, because Coach Staley got hired by, I think, the Chargers, and then different coaches started going different places. And so they hired a new special teams coordinator. So it's always always you're on the edge of your seat just when the season ends, because there's always a lot of change. Every team's always looking to get better. I mean, you look at the 49ers from 18 to 19, like no one really had them pegged as a Super Bowl team, but they kept making the moves. And so every team has to go into that year believing that, yeah, we got the roster to make it to the Super Bowl. And so if you don't, that whole off season, whether coaches are staying or leaving, whether they're getting promotions, whether they get fired, whether contracts end, stuff like that, there's always just a lot of change. And so that there's like, you just got to get used to, there's no guarantees. And people see the Stafford trade and they see the Wentz trade and all these big splash trades. And then here in the next couple of weeks, you'll start to see some big free agent signings. And you just got to remember that the standard is always for you to be better. So even if you had a good year last year, you're now expected to be better, whether you're on the same team or a new team, whether you have the same coach or a different coach. It's you are playing for a team, but at the end of the day, you consistently as an individual player have to continue to improve.
Colin, thank you so much for this. I hope you have a great season with the Rams or wherever, and I'm pulling for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Gabe.
Muito obrigado, Colin. Muito obrigado a você que assistiu. Não deixe de escutar o podcast Cara dos Esportes e não deixe também de aproveitar a promoção, lembrando até o dia 7 de março. Não perca.